Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, a show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a prepared individual and a survivalist in today's day and age. Back in the studio, video and audio recording available on YouTube and Spotify. With me, as always, Jamie Franks. Jamie, welcome back to the show. Catchphrase.
Yeah, it's August now.
It is August now. I thought you were going to come at me with that catchphrase, but
that's at the end.
That's at the end.
That's how I'll close it out.
Okay, you close it out. I open it up. All right. Dude, you just said that it's August, and it's blowing my mind that, like, at first I was like, man, the summer really is blowing by. Like, I saw somebody put up a picture today of their kids going back to school, and then it dawned on me, I'm like, the summer's going by fast. We're on the back end of the year. I just remember being at SHOT Show with you. Like, it was like it was yesterday. We were running around doing SHOT Show things, and here we are halfway, not almost halfway through August, but we're closing in on the halfway point of August already. So,
well, anybody that knows me knows that I'm like, Halloween is my absolute favorite time of the year. It's absolutely my favorite holiday of the year. And the other day on my Instagram, I put up a thing that said we were 100 days from Halloween, and like now I think we're down to like 60 something days to Halloween. And I didn't do it this year, but I normally do a Christmas in July party. So I basically have like a little Christmas party in July, and everybody like brings there's all these rules that go with it, but it's fun. But yeah, so we're had I had that a couple of weeks ago, that would have been halfway to Christmas already. And then I find myself often in this like weird predicament where one of the things I hate the most in life, just in general, is I hate being bored. I hate having nothing to do. So I then plan all these things to do, and then I get super annoyed because I have so many things to do. But I know if I wasn't doing all the things, then I'd be miserable because I was bored. But like my daughter starts back to school in less than 2 weeks now, and it's like I've had all this stuff going on with diving and teaching shooting classes and like stuff with work, and it's like I keep telling myself like, oh, I need to plan a little trip for me and my daughter. And like now it's like she's back to school in 2 weeks. So I still planned a trip anyway. I'm going to pull her out of school for about a week. And if they don't like that, then they probably shouldn't make a habit out of closing school down for 2 years for no reason.
Right.
So
what do you have planned?
So my daughter, over a year ago now, my daughter became a certified scuba diver at the ripe old age of 10. So now she's almost 12 now. And she has quite a few dives under her belt, and where like scuba diving is concerned, I always say that people that learn to dive in Southern California make the best divers in general, because our best days are worse than the worst days in a lot of places like Florida and Hawaii or whatever. Like our water is always dark, it's always cold, it's always surgy, there's always current, there's so diving here, you're constantly year-round diving in the worst conditions. So anywhere you go from here is a step up. So she has never dove anywhere other than these harsh conditions in Southern California. So I'm going to take her to Hawaii for a week and see what it's like to dive in nice, warm, clear water that you can see in and don't have to wear an 8mm wetsuit and a hood and gloves and all that stuff. So we're looking forward to that. That's going to be, but I had to push that to September because, to your point, the summer is almost gone, but not only that, 2023 is over halfway gone. So
I mean, I was just talking, I went out to dinner with a buddy of mine last night. We were having wings and we were talking about camping, and this is the first time in 3 years that I haven't done my my spring camp, and I don't have my fall camp set up right now. I'm probably going to figure out when, and I'm going to do that. But last summer I went away a couple of times, and this summer I haven't done anything. I mean, I went to Houston for the meet and greet, but that was so fast that I didn't really get to enjoy anything. I went to New Hampshire. That was for a pistol class. It wasn't for, a vacation. I'm going to that pistol class in a couple of weeks down in Florida, which is going to be just sweaty. But it's a 2-day class, and then I'm supposed to just drive down to South Florida to see family down there. But again, that's not that much of a vacation. I find it very hard to vacation in Florida because I lived there for 8 years and all my family is still there. So there's always something happening.
Right.
Is it a time away from the house, the dog, the responsibilities? Well, yeah, kind of, but it's not a true vacation. I have Turks and Caicos on my radar, and I would love to do it. I looked at tickets in September, but I'm trying to fit everything in, and I just don't know that it's going to happen.
Yeah,
I
I think it's next week or the week after. It's week after next. I'm doing that 2-day advanced tactical movement pistol and rifle course. It's a 2-day course out here. It's being taught by a Delta Force guy, and yeah, like a year, like 1 year ago today, I would have been back from deployment, but last summer I was on deployment the entire time, and I almost feel like I'm just still been playing catch up to that. But like to your point, just with you just saying that right now, I realized it's been over a year since I've been camping. Like, and it's just gone by so fast. It's crazy.
And I threw that out there to you. I was like, dude, let's do a Montana camp closer to the winter. I watch these
now it's going to
winter.
have to be.
Yeah, that is. But there's just time is our worst, I guess probably our biggest challenge, our worst enemy. Um, I think I put this out many years ago, and somebody said, you know, if you had it all again, would you do more things that you wanted to, or pick a career that you became a millionaire? And somebody put it out there and said, on their deathbed, nobody has ever said that they wish they had more money.
Yep.
So you bring up a good point. Like, don't squander the time that you have, and kind of try and do as much as you can, make as many memories. Today I took a couple hours out of the office, and there's a lot of things happening on the Clark Armory side of my world, and the ZERT side. I didn't. It's in my office, so I don't have it. But the 12th year challenge coins came in today, so I'm just waiting on the T-shirts now. They did not get here yet, and then the certificate has not been finalized, and then I can get 12th year out. But the Clark Armory side is going through so many changes that we have a kickoff call for something that's happening tomorrow for like some big automation, and I'm chomping at the bit because they gave me a taste of it. So I'm like looking around. My developer's like, dude, don't touch anything. Like that's what the kickoff call tomorrow is for. So I decided to take the afternoon and go run some errands, do some things. I actually hit the driving range a little bit and wanted to see how my shoulder is, and my shoulder's good. So I took some time for me today.
Good.
Which is important. But I knew that you and I have had a couple of shows that we've wanted to get on there, and then today when I reached out to you, obviously we decided to sit down and hammer this one out. And this is for all of those listening and watching. This is an episode that Jamie wanted to put on, and basically it was a topic that he thought would be pretty good, and I agreed with him. And at the end of the day, we've given out a lot of information, but I guess the question that we want to ask, and I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, is
what's the best advice you've ever gotten? And this could go many different directions, like most of our discussions tend to. But so we did try to say we were going to try to keep this to the subject matters that are pertinent to ZERT members. So advice that can be relatable to survival situations, or just things of that matter. Because sorry, my voice is a little bit messed up because I've been in instructor mode lately, trying to yell over gunfire and loud hovercrafts. But I've gotten, a lot of times when you go into survival training, or bushcraft training, like there's all these like little rules of thumb that you need to remember. There's the 10 C's of survival, and then there's your 4 priorities of survival. And like last week we talking about like the fundamentals of like land navigation. There's all these like little rules of thumb with land navigation that you have to remember or whatever. So um, this is actually something like anybody that knows me know, like one of the things that my friends always say about me is that I have a saying for everything or I have an analogy for everything. And so a few years ago, uh, somebody told me that I should be on a podcast. And then somebody
Look
told
at
me
that.
that when I retire from the military, I should write a book. And I started thinking like, what should my book be about? Because I don't really think that the story of my career in the military is. I mean, I'm not a Medal of Honor recipient. I didn't fight in the Battle of Fallujah or anything like that. So, what would I have to talk about? And I started thinking about it, and through the course of actually through my childhood, because I grew up with my dad, who was a fireman and a farmer and a mechanic and all these other things, and then my
Right.
grandfather, who was a World War II veteran and a carpenter and so all through my childhood I got good advice from my dad and my grandfather just on kind of for lack of a better word I'll say like manly things like
Sure.
like when you're lost in the woods do this
Right.
and so I got good advice all the way through kind of my childhood and then through my career in the military I've gotten lots of good advice from people in my military career. And my little saying that I've started signing off with is one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten. So that kind of got me to thinking with all these survival rules of thumb that you're supposed to memorize and all that stuff. Like these little pieces of advice can also be very helpful in those situations. And I'll start it off with that since you brought it up. Like the my little sign off is it's easy to be hard, it's hard to be smart. And that was told to me when I was in BUDS training. I went to BUDS training twice to be a Navy SEAL and did not make it. At this point in my life, I have never been a Navy SEAL and am not going to be. But when I was in BUDS training, we like the class. We showed up to the obstacle course one day to run the obstacle course. That's one of your weekly things. You have to run the BUDS obstacle course for a time every week and that's one of your weekly timed standard requirements. And so we show up, and this is San Diego. It doesn't ever get that cold here. It's
Right.
pretty good weather most of the year around. But we do get some really hot days, usually in the fall, and we get some cold days in the winter going into the spring, and we even get some rain during that time. And so this
Right.
my first BUDS class, I think we classed up in February, and so we were starting our class kind of in the winter going into the spring. And we showed up for the obstacle course, and all of us, um, you have to run it just in your pants, boots, and your t-shirt, and that's all. So you have to strip off everything else. And then typically, like the class would arrive to any evolution 10 to 15 minutes before the instructors would get there. We would pre-stage all the equipment. We would go to our whatever the directed state of dress was for each evolution, and then we would do our stretches and warm ups, and then we would be standing by ready to go when the instructors got there. So we fell in for the obstacle course, and it was kind of a cold day, and it was raining, and we're students; they don't care how we feel.
Right.
But the instructors are typically known, like if you watch the Discovery Channel special about BUDS, or if you watch any movies about BUDS, like the BUDS instructors are typically stereotypically known for wearing like the little short shorts, the little UDT shorts, and they're really tight blue uh, BUDS instructor shirts that show off all their muscles and everything, and then sunglasses. Like, in fact, that's one of the things. I don't know if it still is, but like the BUDS instructors wouldn't speak to you unless they had their sunglasses on. But so that was
Right.
the stereotypical dress of the instructors, and so the instructor truck, we're all standing by. The instructor truck pulls up, and all the instructors get out. And there was this one instructor, Instructor Cates. For anybody that's listening that ever went to BUDS in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, you would have known Instructor Cates. Everybody joked that he looked like a 70s porn star. But during that time, the pre 9/11 days, he was one of the few instructors that actually had real world operational experience and combat experience. Because back in those days, a lot of the team guys didn't in pre 9/11. And so all the instructors get out of the truck, and keep in mind it's raining and cold. And he was the only one that had on rain gear. He had on a rain jacket and the waterproof like Gore-Tex rain pants And all the other instructors got out of the trucks on a cold, rainy day, just wearing their shorts and t-shirt. And we all laughed at him. We laughed at the one guy that got out of the truck on a cold, rainy day with a
Prepared.
raincoat and rain pants.
Right.
And he walked over to us and said, and just shook his head and said, "You know what, gents? It's easy to be hard. It's hard to be smart." And like that was tattooed on my brain. And like I felt like such an idiot because we all laughed at the one guy that was doing the smart thing. Like,
Right.
yeah, when it's
Right.
cold, put on a jacket. When it's
Yeah.
raining, put on a raincoat.
Right.
But he got out of the truck and we're like, look at this nerd. But he was the only
Right.
one of the group that was actually doing something smart. So that was like forever tattooed on my brain. And it's so applicable to so many different situations. It's easy to be hard. It's hard to be smart.
Well, you know, and that kind of brings something up. You said it in a previous episode when we were talking about skills versus gear. I think I saw it in a video with Kyle as well. He was doing something for maybe 511, but he was talking about gear while out hunting and where they were going to be camping. And, you know, like he showed fire starter, this, that, and the other thing. And then to your point, you were like, but if I can use a lighter, I'm going to use a lighter. Right. So it's, you know, work smart. I'm a big fan of, you know, work smarter, not harder.
Well, I'm gonna crap on that point a little bit because I always in the military, you know, I'm a pretty senior guy now, and so I always tell the junior guys, the saying "work smarter, not harder" is one of my sayings that I hate the most because I've seen people in the military spend 3 hours trying to find a way to work smart when they could have just taken 10 minutes, got 6 other guys, let's pick this thing up and let's just move it, instead of spending hours trying to rig an elaborate series of weights and pulleys. Like, let's just get 4 other guys and pick this freaking thing up and do it.
Right. But working smart is finding the easiest solution, and they weren't working smart.
Yeah.
It may be working smart is the hard, is the immediate task, which also might be the harder task because it's physical, but you're not going to, that wasn't working smart versus working hard. Working smart versus hard to me is finding the smartest way to do it. And it may involve, hey, 3 guys come over here, lift this up. That's the smartest way, instead of, you know, wasting multiple hours to, like you said, rig up a pulley system. So, so I think it's how that phrase is interpreted and used is what makes it either good or bad. So,
well, no, yeah, that's actually a really good point. It's how does the user of the phrase or even the recipient of the phrase, how do they interpret it? Because
how do they interpret?
There's when you say that phrase, there's one specific instance that comes to mind, and like now this has literally been 20 years ago. I don't even remember what was in the box, but like this big, huge, heavy box was delivered. It was like for my division, and so we had to figure out a way to get this box like from the pier onto the ship, and then once it was on the ship, we had to get it to our workspace. And I think at that point I was like an E6, and so I told my more junior guys to you know go make it happen.
Right.
And like 3 or 4 hours later, that box had only moved like 12 feet. And I'm like, why is this thing not up here? And I wish I could remember what was in it. It was some piece of equipment that we needed, but I don't remember. But like, well, we can't figure out how to do this. And so they were trying to figure out the smartest route to go around the ship where they could like lay these things down and slide it down the ladder. And what I'm like, why didn't you guys just get like 3 more guys, just lift this thing up and just carry it? It would have been done by now. And then like, ultimately, I remember we got to this like steep ladder that we had to go down, and I went and got a roll of duct tape and pulled off these big strips of duct tape and twisted them and then braided them together. And I like made, instead of wasting time going to find rope, I found a roll of duct tape and I braided the duct tape into like a little makeshift rope that could work for 5 minutes for us to get this thing down the ladder. And and so, and that was the day that I was like, you retards have spent all day trying to find a way to work smarter, not harder. And, you know,
right. So it definitely depends on who takes that information and kind of how they take it, because you know, and I hate to bring in this generation kind of gap discussion, but you give that to somebody our age versus somebody 20 years younger, and you're going to get that whole 4 hours wasted to Google it on the interwebs and see if it's trending somewhere, to, where it's just like, okay, it could be a mechanical fix, not a internet fix. But,
Yeah, and I think you have used the saying before, paralysis by analysis.
oh yeah.
That's
Yep.
so that's in the same vein as well.
Yeah, that's a big one too. You just get into that think mode, and it just kind of, it's too much. And it's at one point you just kind of got to pull the trigger. But, kind of bringing this back to that, what's the best or worst advice you've been given when it comes to, a survival situation? I mean, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think some of the things that I've been given, or information that I've been given, and it's more kind of information that I've kind of gathered myself. Is there something that stands out for you?
So I wrote down several, but there's four of these that I wrote down that almost could be rolled into one big one again, depending on how each person wants to interpret it. But we did the podcast where we talked about the kids that survived in the plane crash.
Sure.
And they were all, there was, I think the oldest one was 14, if I remember correctly.
I believe so. Yeah, 13 or 14.
Yeah. And so like one of the ones I wrote down that kind of pertains to that situation is, and we say it in the military all the time, like, when you're in charge, be in charge, like make decisions. And where that can be rolled into a ball with some other like good pieces of advice or sayings that I've heard. I've heard the saying, like Jocko, I listen to Jocko's podcast a lot. Like the thing he always talks about is just pick a direction. And like the example he always uses is like, if you were blindfolded, knocked out, whatever, and taken out to some remote wilderness where you don't even know what continent you're on, you don't know where you are, you don't know where the nearest civilization is, you don't know where the nearest river is, you've just, the blindfold is taken off, and now all of a sudden you're just in the wilderness. You have no idea where you are, you have no idea where you are relative to other things, you don't know anything. What should you do? And Jocko said, like, and I agree with it completely, but I'll attribute this to him, like, just pick a direction. Like, pick a direction, start walking. And as you gather more little clues or pieces of information along the way, now you can make more informed decisions. And maybe you can decide to go a little bit to the left, and maybe you go a little bit further and you find that direction leads up a mountain. Okay, well, now I actually have a little bit of information, so now I can alter my decision making, and I'm going to go back the other way. And so his point being, when in charge, be in charge. When you're in a position to make decisions, make a decision. When you don't know what decision to make, just pick a direction and start walking. And then as you gather more information, you can tweak your decision making. So like, I think that's a good piece of advice, because as we've talked about many times, like, people back themselves into these corners where they paint everything with these extremes. Like, you have to go extreme left or you have to go extreme right, and there's nothing in between. But that's almost never the case. You can almost always find the middle ground, and that goes with decision making as well. Instead of making this huge, big decision, if I'm going to go left or am I going to go right, you can make a small decision, and you can just decide, I'm going to go a little bit this way until I know more, and then reevaluate my decision. And go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then like the other one, I've heard this piece of advice or saying, I've heard this attributed to Theodore Roosevelt, and I've heard a version of it attributed to General Omar Bradley, and General Patton even. But it's basically comes down to the worst decision you can make is to not make a decision. And I think the version that's attributed to Roosevelt is, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. the next best thing to do is the wrong thing, and the worst thing to do is nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
But then I think the version I've heard attributed to Omar Bradley was the worst decision you can make is to not make a decision. And then that kind of feeds up to Jocko's thing where it's just like, just pick a direction and start walking.
Yeah.
And then adjust.
So I kind of want to just, I think a couple of those relates back to that paralysis by analysis, right?
Yeah.
Like you literally just, you get locked down. You don't know what to do, I guess. And one of the things that I liked, and I kind of use it, and I think it attributes and correlates back to what you just said, is make a plan, execute the plan, expect the plan to go off the rails, throw away the plan. But where that means is you throw away the plan, and what I like to add to that is have a backup plan. So again, if your plan is to, walk to point A, should this happen, and then somewhere along the way, you realize point A is not an option, do you give up, or do you pick a different direction and start walking and gather more information to then determine what's next? So
yeah, and that goes to I don't even have this one written down, but you just reminded me of it. Like the saying goes, I think just because you spent a lot of time making a bad decision doesn't mean you have to stick with it. So kind of to your point, like if you make this plan and you start executing the plan and the plan starts going south, just because you spent 8 hours writing this plan down, that doesn't mean you're married to it. Like,
expect the plan to go off the rails.
Yeah, exactly.
Throw away the plan. I mean, it's maybe harsh, but again, it depends on the recipient of that, or the person that's thinking that, and how they compartmentalize that, or how they use that. You've heard me say before, what I have on me gets me to my truck. What I have in my truck gets me home. Okay, great. What if home isn't an option? Is what I have in my truck enough to get me something? I go back to, yeah, right. But I go back to a post that I made in the beginning of this COVID crap, when everybody was freaking out about toilet paper. And I put a post up. I said, I'm one man who may have to use toilet paper in my house once a day, if that. I have enough toilet paper to last me for 3 years. And the conversation, and the point to that is, and if I run out, I have the means to get more, meaning I don't need 20,000 rounds of ammunition. I have enough that I can move with it, and then I can get more.
That's
should
what
I
they
need
want
to.
you to think.
Right, exactly. But it's funny. And then this just came up the other day. I was talking to my parents. I was like, because I think that post came up or something, but I still have toilet paper in my house. I have not bought any. I mean, I went to Costco. You go to Costco and you get toilet paper for 4 years. I mean, unless you have chronic diarrhea, I don't know what you're doing, or eating a ton of fiber. But so I guess that would be one of my pieces of information that a good piece of advice that I've gotten is that about the plan, and then I'm trying to think. I'd love to hear what have you got for bad advice? Like, what have you heard? And then not so much somebody's told you, but I think it's probably going to be more, what you've heard other people say to people just kind of learning or getting into this.
There's
Buy a Springfield.
Yeah, right. Well, that's one of the ones I've written down that my dad told me years ago was never sell a gun. Like,
and we can talk about that.
Yeah, like train with the gun you have, keep the gun you have, buy a new gun, buy another gun, but don't ever sell a gun. And I've kind of come around to the kind of the belief that if you buy good guns, they'll never go down in value. Like if you buy good guns, you can almost always sell them for at least what you paid for them, as long as you bought good ones. But that was one of the ones my dad taught me that maybe I've taken a little too literally in my life. Although I think like like because for many years I was a sponsored pro shooter. So I was going to all these competitions and shooting these competitions where it really wasn't costing me anything to go. My sponsors were paying for my hotel room, and my sponsors were paying for my travel, and my sponsors were providing my ammo, and my sponsors provided my my weapons and optics and all that stuff. So all I had to do was show up and look pretty and perform well. I did half of that. But
we'll leave it up to the listeners to determine which one that
exactly.
was.
But I always felt obligated. I felt like I was kind of being a dirtbag. Like if I won a gun that was provided by a match sponsor, because that that also competitive shooting really only still exists because of the generosity of the sponsors of the match.
Sure.
The sponsors of the match is why there's a prize table, and the prize table is in a lot of cases kind of what keeps people coming back or gets people's foot in the door in the first place. So without the generous match sponsors, I kind of think competitive shooting for the most part would die off. I mean, I think there would still be a small band of people that compete just for the raw sake of competition, of just trying to find out who's best. But I think a lot of people are attracted at least at some point or initially by the prize table, and that's all provided by the generous sponsors in the industry. So anytime I would go to a match and win a gun, that's always the top thing on the prize tables. The prize tables are all organized. Like one end of the prize table is the most valuable prizes, and then it kind of trickles down to the least valuable in terms of monetary value prizes. And if you come in first place in your division, you get to be the first guy that walks the table, and you can pick anything you want. If you want to pick the cheapest thing on the table, you can. But obviously, most people that come in those first positions, they go to the valuable end of the table and take the most valuable things off the table. But I always kind of felt like a dirtbag since I didn't even pay anything to be there. Really, my sponsors absorbed all those costs for me to be there. I almost always felt obligated to keep. If I won guns and won stuff, I kind of felt obligated to keep it instead of turning it around for a profit, since I didn't even pay anything to be at the competition. But I will say, 4 guns that I won in competition, I did sell them, and it was just like a pretty bare bones Bushmaster AR-15 that I won, and that's not because I think there's anything wrong with Bushmaster. It's just like I already have like 17 ARs, and that Bushmaster just like wasn't anything special. So I did sell that one to a friend that wanted an AR, and I said, okay, well, this is a pretty good entry level one. And then I've won 3 XD pistols, and I've sold all of those because I just don't want them. But
yeah. All right. Well, so I mean, and that is, I guess, obviously some good advice, and we could probably have a whole separate episode on good and or bad advice, or both, when it comes to firearm purchases and firearms training. Justin, I mean, that's a whole, probably a 4-hour episode right there.
Yeah, there's as an instructor, there's tons of bad, what I call conventional wisdom, that has just been put out and has trickled down, like, both, through the military, on the military side, and just, trickled down into the civilian side too. I mean, and a simple example of that where it pertains to like firearms training is when you're zeroing a rifle to shoot a 3-shot group, and then adjust and shoot a 3-shot group, and then shoot a 4-shot group, because that 4th shot is for confirmation, right? So 3, 3, and 4, how many is that?
10.
10, right? So in the military, all of our clips of ammunition, and I'm using the word clips in the correct manner, our clips of ammunition come in 10 rounds. And so In the military, once we crack open a can of ammo, if we don't shoot it all, we have to count it all so that it's all accounted for when we turn it back in, and then it has to be inventoried and resealed with the little lead actual tamper seal. So the easiest thing to do when we crack open a can of ammunition is to shoot it all.
Right.
And since each clip comes in 10 rounds, everybody running the range would tell their students or tell their trainees to shoot 3 and 3 and then 4, because that used all 10 rounds, and now we don't have to count it, or it makes it easier to count if we do. So that's where, like, as a firearms instructor, when I tell people to when I'm helping people or teaching people to zero their rifle properly, we do 5-shot groups. And there's a reason for that, but this conventional wisdom of 3-shot groups came from way back in the military, where lazy people didn't want to count ammunition at the end of a range day. So they told you to do 3-shot groups, followed by, and then adjust your sights, do another 3-shot group, adjust your sights again if you need to, and then shoot a 4-shot group for confirmation. But that's really only because 3 + 3 + 4 = 10. And now we've used an entire clip of ammunition, and now we don't have to count anything. Right. So the firearms industry is full of things like that. And like the Mozambique drill, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. There's a million different little stories and justifications, and who came up with this drill and why is it called the Mozambique, and why is it 2 to the chest and 1 to the head. The short answer and the real answer is because it's a drill made to be. It was a drill that was developed when most people shot a revolver, when most law enforcement people shot revolvers, and the 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, very simply, was a drill that you could do twice with a 6-shooter without having to reload. So but it's a good drill. But there's all these like things of like, well, because these people were protecting the president of Mozambique, and these assassins came and they were wearing body armor, and so they got shot twice in the chest, and it didn't stop them, so then they had to do a headshot. Like, that's all great, but really that drill was developed because people were shooting 6-shooters, and it's a drill you could run through twice without having to reload your revolver. But
we're gonna definitely come back to that one with that whole conversation, with that whole other episode that you wanted to talk about. We'll just call it gun battles or I don't know, because there's gun battles in movies, and there's also, I mean, the probably one of the most entertaining. No, I'm gonna take that back. Probably the best Mozambique drill in TV. You know where I'm going with this?
I have 2 that are coming to mind: Miami Vice and Collateral with Tom Cruise. But
Collateral was a movie, but movie,
okay,
yep. Yeah. TV, Miami Vice. Yep. That one, I mean, and that dude was I think he was a competition shooter.
Yep.
Right?
Dan Zubina.
Yeah.
He was one of the like OG competitive shooters, like way back when when Rob Latham was in his 20s, and like Mike Voight, and when before Jerry Miculek even had, I was about to say before Jerry Miculek had bifocals, but it was before he even had monofocals.
Yeah, probably.
But like back then, like in the early days of competitive shooting, like when the original Team Safariland guys and everything, he was one of those OGs. Yeah,
he smoked that drill. Anybody that has not seen that, Google Miami Vice Mozambique drill and enjoy the outfits, and then enjoy the actual drill.
There's one video out, that has like a voiceover breakdown of the drill, and I guess he was initially brought in just to be an advisor, but nobody could do it as well as he could, so they dressed him up and put him in the show. But there's one version of the video that wasn't Magpul. I can't remember, but there's one version of it, if you do Google search it or look it up on YouTube, that has a really good voiceover that goes along with it when they actually break everything down, and they superimpose a timer over the video and actually break down his split times and all that. It's really good.
Yeah, pretty wild. So I guess when it comes down to today's episode, and that the best advice and the worst advice, this is where it can get kind of, I don't want to say scary, but it can be very concerning if people are out there getting and putting stock in the worst advice when it comes to a survival situation. And obviously it kind of plays off of last week's episode when we broke that handbook out, right?
Yep.
If you have something that's called a handbook and it's giving you survival advice and it turns out to get you killed, like it's not a good book and should not be used that way.
You can
I
write
guess
that one down in the bad advice category if it gets you
th-
killed.
exactly. So you know, it's just it's scary. It's scary that that information is so freely out there and people could be taking it and using it the wrong way. Um, I don't know. I'm trying to
Well,
think of other bad advice, but go ahead.
speaking in terms of like just in general, like good advice and bad advice that can be applied to many different facets of life or survival or your professional life or your personal life or whatever. Um, a good typical is not the right word. A good general rule of thumb is either steer clear or be immediately suspicious of any piece of advice or any rule of thumb that involves the words always or never.
Right.
Any piece of advice where it's like always do this, never do that. Like
Right.
I'm immediately suspicious anytime I hear the words always or never.
Right. Yep. I think that's good. Yeah. Um and if you're out there giving that advice, I would implore you to really check that at the door and and think about what you're about to say and really kind of box that word always and apply it to everything. And because you may have not thought about it when you use that absolute term, that okay, wait a minute, I've never actually, maybe it's just being regurgitated, which is the worst part, right? Like if you're, and I guess this is one of those disclaimers out there, if anybody's listening to this and you're one of these people or you know one of these people, if you're out there regurgitating other information that you have not really experienced, stop. Just I wouldn't do that.
Me and a lot of my peers who actually like are really good firearms instructors, like there is a branch of the firearms instructor tree that we refer to as professional regurgitators. That like there are many people that have popped up in the firearms instructor world, probably in the last 10 years, that really um, speaking of advice and catchphrases or whatever, like one of my little phrases that I say all the time is, I had to go to war to learn what I know, and I'm not going to give it away for free. So you can pay me to come take one of my classes, and I'll teach you what I learned through experience. And my partner and I that teach together, like that's one of our little pillars of our shooting school and the classes that we teach, is that we very rarely, with few exceptions, will we ever tell a student that something they are doing is wrong.
Okay.
I've been around this stuff long enough that I've seen most of the techniques and I've heard most of the procedures and stuff that's out there. But I'll rarely tell a student they're doing something wrong. I'll explain to them how I do it. I'll explain to them why I do it this way. I'll explain to them these other methods, these other techniques that I've heard about or that I've seen. And then I'll even explain why I believe that my way is better. However, if you're able to get your gun out of the holster and put a shot on target on purpose in a pretty quick time, I can't really tell you that you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Like I can try to show you a little technique that can maybe shave off a tenth of a second here or there, but if you're getting shots on target on purpose pretty quickly, then I can't tell you that you're doing it wrong. And speaking of like things that are always and never, I've heard a lot of shooting instructors, firearms instructors that go that like their way is the only way. And where this episode and good advice and bad advice is concerned, that's why I like going still at my level and my field of experience, I like going and taking classes from other instructors, and
Right.
I tell other people, I encourage people not to just take my classes, like go out and take classes from other people. Um, and even for myself, if I can go out and take a class from somebody, and if I can even learn one thing that I didn't know before, then that class is paid for itself. One of the last classes that I took from somebody else, one thing that the instructor said that really stuck into my head, that like now I'm going to steal it, and for the next few classes, I'll give
Okay.
that instructor, I'll credit that instructor with saying it, but after probably about 4 or 5 classes, I'm just gonna pretend like it was my thing that I came up with. Um, but no, he said, because a lot of people get wrapped up around round count, like, oh, I've put X amount of thousands of rounds through this gun, and I've done that, And it's funny because when I teach my classes, usually like on the next range over, um, I'll be in the middle of explaining something, and somebody that we can't see on the next range over will just be like pow 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 pow
Right.
pow 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 pow, and like
Yeah.
that guy just pissed away 50 rounds and learned nothing.
No.
So that guy is concerned about round count. That's the guy that has his gun in a gun case, brings it to the range once or twice a month, opens the gun case, puts 100 rounds through it, or 200 rounds or whatever, and then puts it back in the case and takes it home, and that's where it stays. And so that guy may have hundreds or thousands of rounds through his gun, but hasn't learned anything. And so the thing that I took from this other instructor, which is a good piece of advice, what's more important than round count is the amount of time you're spending with your gun in your hand. And like, that can be dry fire, that can be live fire, that can be just deciding I'm going to pull out my concealed carry gun and go clear my house, even though I feel relatively certain, short of ninjas coming through the air conditioning vent, I'm pretty certain there's not any bad guys in my house right now, but I could pull out my
Right.
gun right now and go clear my house,
Yeah.
and fire 0 rounds and learn several things. And so I thought that was a really good piece of advice that stuck in my head from the last class that I took from someone, that far more important than round count is time spent with your gun in your hand.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah. And I think you mentioned that to me in a conversation we had last week, and I
Yep.
think um, I don't know if I had mentioned it before or after, but you know, probably 3 or 4 nights a week, if I am just relaxing on the couch, catching up on, whatever, watching reruns of Sopranos, whatever that case may be, I do take my carry gun, make sure it's clear, and I will grab 2 empty magazines, and I will just do mag changes repeatedly while watching TV. Mag change, punch out, acquire a sight picture, pull the trigger, and then reset. Just that rep. Just to and I can't tell you how many times I've done it. Do I still fumble a mag change every once in a
Yep.
while? Of course. I mean, I not to throw out just dirt, but I've watched you. I've watched you shoot, and I know how well you shoot, and I've watched you fumble a mag change. But it's you. But I've also seen the way that you drive people right through that when you're just constantly pushing them, pushing them, pushing them. So you know, practice, practice, practice. But it's also if you fumble that, you know, you're not giving up. But anyway, um, some of that advice, I guess, where I would say a great piece of advice was the way that I watched you handle that. It was one of the ZERT classes that we had out in California, and I think it was maybe your first or second out there. But it was on video where a guy you were running a drill, and he was fumbling, and you were right there pushing him through that. So um, you will fall into the good advice category.
Well, another good piece of advice is you will never rise to the occasion. You will sink to your level of training. That's another one of my absolute favorites.
There it is, and
Um,
that has come up.
yeah, everybody thinks like and I've used my dad here as a good example because he's given me some good advice in my life, but I'll use him as a
Yeah.
bad example. Like, he thinks that just because he's seen every John Wick movie 3 times each, that like in a gunfight he's going to perform like John Wick, but that's not the case. And that's a very extreme example, but that's another example that's applicable across many different parts of the spectrum of life. You're not gonna magically just rise to the occasion. You're gonna sink to whatever your level of training is. And then to add on to, I think my little add on that I came up with, a phrase that I coined is, um, you're never going to rise to the occasion. You're going to sink to your level of training. And if you haven't had any level of training, you're going to mimic what you think you've seen. And
Right.
that's probably not going to work out very well.
And I think that saying right there, and again, when we've talked about training in the past, and we always kind of defer back to or default back to firearms training, but that goes to everything. So that piece of advice right there is definitely something that people should latch onto, and then take stock in what you think you have training in and what you think that situation might be. If you run into a situation where you're going to have to survive outdoors for a week in not so good climate, are you going to rise or revert back to or fall to, that level of training? And then the worst case, which would be the last part that you just said, is, were you going to mimic what you saw or what you read? And
What you think you
what you
saw.
what you think you saw, or what you think you saw, and that goes back to the book last week. Like, are you going to go searching for churches in a abandoned town and see if it has the thing that we were talking about? I mean, I don't know.
Well,
We haven't done enough research from that book to determine if it's good advice, bad advice, or just reading material.
you know what?
What?
There's another piece of good advice.
Do it. Lay it on me.
Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. So, where, like the book we discussed last week, um, sure, read the book, take the information on board. If something seems interesting to you, like the things that we pointed out that we had never heard or never realized before, go out and try it. Go out and see if it's true. Go out and train on it. Go, like, hey, it told me I could do this thing. Let me see if that works. Let me take out a sewing needle and rub it against this piece of metal and float it on a leaf in the water and see if it points
Wool,
north.
right?
Oh, huh?
Isn't it wool?
Steel wool, maybe, but you got to magnetize the needle. But anyway,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
yeah, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. Like, go and see if these things work or not. And one time I was talking to, I'm sure this is probably another one where you could find 100 different examples that are worded slightly different, that are attributed to different people. But Gabby Franco is a friend of mine, and when she got eliminated from Top Shot, she said one of the things she said was that you learn a lot more from losing than you do from winning, because when you win, you go, I won. My job is done here. I am the best.
Yep.
When you lose, it gives you something to work on. It gives you something to take away. It gives you something to drive yourself to be better at, to identify those weaknesses and correct them. So it's kind of in that same vein. Like, read these things in the book, go out, see if they work, and you'll probably learn more from the things that don't work.
Right. So you raise an interesting point there. And I talk about bad leaders and bad leadership that I've had, and it's funny. Obviously, I've read a good portion of some of those leadership books out there. I'm not going to say I read them all, but I read a couple of them. One in particular, obviously, was Leadership in the Shadows, and I've experienced bad leaders, and I'm just talking. I'm talking in a just a complete work environment, nothing military, nothing that's not me. I'm talking about just in previous employers, and I had a leader, a boss, right? I have learned the most valuable lessons from bad leaders.
Yep. That is 100% true in the military as well.
Yep.
If nothing else, from a bad leader, I learned the value in just not being that guy. If I'm ever presented with this situation, I'm not going to do it that way.
Right. Right. And that goes back to that bad advice.
Yeah.
There's bad leaders, and there's probably dangerous leaders. And that's a whole different ball of wax to get into. But I guess I'll put the question out there: Could a bad leader give good advice in a situation, a survival situation, in a you know um, like one of those situations, firearms, survival, medical?
Sure. Like this is another thing that that I'll attribute to Jocko. Like leadership is a skill just like anything else. Like leadership is something that you can be bad at and develop and learn to be better. And leadership is one of those things that's developed through these foundational building blocks, and and even that goes back to my example before of rising to the occasion versus sinking to your lowest level. And if you don't have a level, you're going to resort to what you think you have seen in the past. And so
Right.
I people that have never been in the military, like kind of a common misconception that people think is that like that just military personnel in general are just these automatons or these robots that are like, I order you to do this thing, and you're just going to go, yes, sir. And you're just going to march away and do the thing exactly that I ordered you to do. But I've been in the military for 26 years, and the amount of times that I have told somebody, I order you to do this, like, maybe once or twice in 26 years has that ever been the case that I've had to actually tell somebody, I order you to go do this thing, because it's not going to work. Like, that's like dragging your dog over to the water bowl and sticking their face in the water bowl and telling them to
Right.
drink. Like they're not going to.
Yeah.
And just within that one small example, there's a million problems. Like you're incentivizing people to push back, you're engaging people's egos, you're becoming belittling, and then they're losing respect for you. And like just in that one small example of me as a military leader going, I order you to X, Y, and Z. Like I can tell you, like nothing in the military happens that way.
Right.
So it's funny because when you put people, I actually just very recently, just in the last couple of weeks in my job, I had this issue with a guy who he's been in the military for a little bit, and he's worked his way up through the ranks. He's was an E6, which is kind of like that's like upper level middle management, I guess I could say, like in the military is an E6. And but somehow this guy has navigated his way to being an E6, but you could tell he's never really been in charge of people before.
Okay.
And like now all of a sudden we had to put him in this role where now he's in charge, but he hasn't ever been before. And what did he do? He kind of immediately reverted back to this drill sergeant mentality that I was kind of just describing, where I order you to drop and do push-ups right now. Like that's not how we do business in the military. But because he has never really had to be in charge of anything before, somehow he made it to the level of E6 without ever having to lead people before.
Right.
And so now that he's in this role where he needs to make decisions, he needs to be in charge, and he needs to lead people, he immediately reverted back to this drill sergeant thing that he probably saw on TV. And
wow.
Guess how that worked out for him? Like
Probably not well.
not very well, and we like kind of immediately had to fire him. So
Jesus.
I mean, not wow. We didn't kick him out of the military, but we had to
right.
remove him from that position like almost immediately.
Yeah.
Because He had not developed his leadership skills, and he sunk to his lowest level and then reverted to what he thinks he has seen, and that was
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I I think that's probably more common than we would like it to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, it may be a stretch, but I think that it's more common that people end up with the bad advice being given to them than the good advice when it comes to some of these things. You hope that it's not, and you really, you hope that people are being smart when it comes to seeking out this information and obtaining it from people, from instructors, whether you take a bushcraft class, or or you just go and you start looking on the internet. I'll put this question out there to you. Do you think that YouTube is a good place to acquire information? I'm going to say information and not knowledge.
Well, that's the point I was going to make is that's one of the things that we saw in COVID, and it's something we see constantly in the firearms realm, is people confusing knowledge. They confuse this piece of information that they have for knowledge.
Right.
Knowledge and information.
Two different things.
Yep. But if, like in the example of, I mean, kind of what we're talking about, like if for many, many, many years, I actually until from the time I turned 16 in the year 1995. And from 1995 until 3 years ago, all I had ever had was Toyotas. That's all I'd ever driven was Toyotas. And so a few years ago, I bought it was the first brand new car I had ever bought. It was a Subaru Outback. Insert Subaru Outback jokes here. But like Toyota has done a really fair job at like standardizing all their stuff across the board. Like if you know how to work on the brakes on one Toyota, you know how to work on the brakes of pretty much any Toyota, because they're all just about the same. So when it came time for me to do my brakes on my Subaru, I didn't really know how to do it, and I didn't want to go into it blind. I do know how to do brakes, but I did not know specifically how to do Subaru brakes. So before I even started on it and started ripping my car apart, I went on YouTube and watched several different videos of how to do a Subaru brake job and picked up several little pieces of information. But because I already had a foundation of knowledge on how to do brake jobs in general, I can take the knowledge and experience I already had and take away these key pieces of information that then set me up for success. And I went out and did my brakes on my Subaru, and everything was fine. So yes, it can be a good resource as long as you don't live in that area, kind of, not to beat a dead horse, but kind of going back to that same thing with the survival book. Like, you can't live in this little area of absolutes where just because somebody wrote this thing down and a publisher printed it into a book, therefore it is truth. And I didn't only watch one video on how to do a Subaru brake job. I watched 3 or 4, and then kind of bounced it off of the knowledge and experience that I already had. And then so yes, it can be a good resource, as long as you're willing to be smart and not just try to be hard. And
there it is. I mean, trust but verify.
Yeah.
Is another, I think, another great piece of advice that I've been given. Also, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah, you can shear a sheep many times, but skin it only once. I like that version.
There you go.
Of that thing.
Yep. There you go. And lastly, for me, and I don't know if we have covered all of the notes that you have on there, but the last piece of great advice that I think I've heard and I would like to impart to everybody is that you don't need a parachute to skydive. You just need a parachute to skydive again.
Yeah, you need a parachute if you're going to skydive twice. Yeah. Yeah, that we hit everything that I had written down. There was one more from my dad and one more from my granddad actually that we didn't hit.
Let's hear them.
One of the things my dad always said is, if you need a tool, go buy it. Don't borrow it. Don't rent it. If you need a tool, go buy it, because then you'll have it. Because if you need it once, there is a chance that you'll need it again in the future. And again, I think that has application like in the prepping and survival realm as well. If you find yourself in a situation where you need something, it stands to reason that you're probably going to need it again. You know, that like hopefully every car you've ever had has a spare tire. You didn't just have a spare tire in this one car this one time.
Right.
You have one in every car. So because there's a chance you might need it. And then, so if you need a tool, if you ever need a tool, buy it, don't borrow it. And then one of the things that this is one of the things that I pass this along to, for anybody that doesn't know, I'm a senior chief in the Navy. Any of the new chiefs every year, this is one of the pieces of advice that I give to them, because I think it has been partially directly responsible for my successes in the military. And it was my granddaddy shook my hand the day before I left to go to boot camp when I first joined the Navy. And my granddaddy was in the Army in World War II. He landed in Normandy, but not on D-Day. He actually landed the day after D-Day, but he fought in the Battle of the Bulge and in Bastogne. Well, that was the Battle of the Bulge. But like all the way into Germany and Austria and Holland and all the way through France and all that stuff. So my granddad was a combat veteran in World War II. But the day before I left to go to boot camp, he shook my hand and he said, remember, son, when you get in there, it doesn't matter if you're talking to a private or a general. He said, you just remember, they're all just a man just like you are. He's like, so talk to them like a man. And that's the way he said it. But don't talk up to people because they're in a certain position, and don't talk down to people because they're in a certain position. Kind of talk to everybody the same, and talk to everybody based on their individual merits, not because of their position or their rank, or just because this person's a lower rank right now doesn't mean they're an idiot. And just because this person may be a general, it doesn't mean that they're a genius, you know? So I think that's definitely been helpful for me during my time in the military. And I think that's a good piece of advice for everybody in life. Just don't talk to people differently based on your perception of their position. Talk to everybody the same based on. Yeah, I do too.
I like that a lot. And I think that, you know, while there's more that we could go down, but I think that's a pretty good one to end. I want everybody to stop this right here, rewind that a few seconds, and hear that again. I think that's important, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your personal relationship, whether it's with your children, or just obviously, friends. I think that's important to kind of live those words. So thanks for sharing that one, Jamie.
Yeah, that's all I've got.
These episodes, and when I talk to people and we talk about ZERT and, where it's going and what the future of it is, these episodes to me are very fun, very exciting. I look forward to doing these each week. Sometimes we, we have upcoming shows because there are things that you've put out to me that we want to talk about. Sometimes it's, last minute things. But we say it every week. If you're listening to this on the podcast channels, or if you're watching this on YouTube, provide us the information. If there is something you want to hear us talk about, review, gear wise, movie wise, situation wise, let us know. We'd be happy to do it. It takes some weight off of my shoulder and Jamie's shoulders to figure out what our next topic is going to be. You and I have had numerous conversations in the past that span, hour, 2 hours. I do the same thing with Paul when I get on the phone with him. It's like a 2 hour conversation, and I'm just like, wow, we talked about so much in there. So you and I, we could do this all day long every week, but
Yeah, and I'll tell
having
you,
that,
I think you and I are the same. Like, if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer. Like, I'll think about it for a second, but I will formulate an opinion and give it to you. So,
yeah,
I think that would be interesting. Like, I would definitely at least love to do like one episode where we just either by Facebook or by Instagram or whatever, like take
that's
questions from people where you're forcing us to form an opinion on the spot about whatever it is that you're asking. So I
yeah.
think that would be very interesting and entertaining. But
You know what, and that's how we'll end this episode. I think that's what's going to happen. Um, I will put up a poll on the main Facebook page, which will then get shared to all of the squadron and state pages, and we're going to ask for a list of 20 questions. I'll probably do a live on Facebook, and then put the post up and put the poll up. So we'll
we should,
we'll put that together.
yeah, we if that happens, we should get Paul in on that too. Because
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. We gotta see if Paul can get this part of it going. It doesn't have to be this entire setup, but he just bought a house, and so he's he's building a range on it. So he is going to have a range on his property, and
Yeah, well, I'll keep checking my mailbox for my invitation.
I'm sure we'll have it. We'll go spend a weekend. He's got a pole barn, and he's setting it up for a classroom. So, yeah, you'll have to come to the East Coast. But all right, man. Well, as always, please, we post this up on Thursday, so tune in on your favorite channel, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Google, or now you can check us out on the ZERT YouTube channel, and you can watch this interaction and see our lovely faces, or you can listen while you are at work or on the drive to work. So until next time, you guys stay safe out there, and
It's easy to be hard, and it's hard to be smart.
all right, guys, until next time, we'll talk to you later. Bye.